They didn't sit down expecting anything unusual. That's what makes it unsettling. The table was already set, plates aligned, silverware untouched, the room filled with the soft, almost forgettable sound of rain pressing against the windows. At first, Drenched Dinner feels ordinary, almost intentionally forgettable, and that's the trap, because ordinary moments are where we hide the most dangerous truths. Not in shouting, not in chaos, but in routines we've repeated so often that we stop questioning them. Audiences didn't realize it yet, but the moment the camera lingered just a second too long on the tablecloth, something had already gone wrong. Viewers later said the same thing in thousands of comments across platforms. I didn't know why, but I felt uneasy. That feeling matters because discomfort without explanation is the oldest warning system we have. The story doesn't rush. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for attention. Instead, it waits. And the rain keeps falling. Early reactions show something fascinating. People leaned in, not because something dramatic happened, but because nothing did. Silence stretches. A glance goes unanswered. A question almost gets asked and then doesn't. This is where Drenched Dinner begins its real work. It forces the audience to participate. Without realizing it, viewers start filling in gaps. They imagine conversations. They assume intentions. They project meaning where none has been confirmed. That's when the story quietly takes control. Because once a viewer starts projecting, the story isn't just happening on the screen anymore. It's happening inside them. The rain grows heavier, and still, nothing explodes. This frustrated some viewers at first. You can see it in early reaction clips, subtle shifts in posture, quick glances away from the screen, nervous laughter. But those who stayed for a reason, because the tension wasn't loud. It was personal. The dinner table becomes a symbol before anyone realizes it. A place where time slows down, where avoidance looks like politeness, where eye contact feels dangerous. Psychologically, this is powerful. Studies show that when humans sense unresolved tension, the brain stays hyper alert, not relaxed, not entertained, alert. That's why so many viewers said they couldn't look away. They weren't waiting for a twist. They were waiting for permission to breathe, and that permission never came. Instead, Drenched Dinner introduces its first quiet betrayal, not between characters, but between expectation and reality. We're conditioned to believe that stories warn us before they hurt us. Music swells. Camera angles shift. Something signals danger. Nothing does. The lighting stays soft. The rain stays steady. The characters stay composed. And yet, the audience feels exposed. This is the moment where reactions begin to diverge. Some viewers feel irritated. Others feel nervous. A smaller group feels something far deeper, recognition. They don't know what they're recognizing yet, but their bodies do. Heart rates increase slightly. Breathing becomes shallow. The story has entered the nervous system. Social media reactions from the first hour of release show a strange pattern. People didn't tweet about plot points. They tweeted about feelings. I feel weird after watching this. This made me uncomfortable in a way I can't explain. Why did this remind me of something I don't want to think about? That's not accidental. Drenched Dinner doesn't use shock. It uses memory. The rain outside the window is constant now. Ignorable and slowly. Viewers realize the rain isn't atmosphere. It's pressure. Pressure that never stops. The first true shift happens, so subtly that many didn't catch it on first viewing. A line delivered too calmly. A response delayed half a second too long. But once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. This is where the audience begins to sense that the dinner isn't about what's being served. It's about what's being withheld. The camera lingers on hands, on napkins, on plates that remain untouched. Food becomes irrelevant. This matters because meals, culturally, are about connection, sharing, resolution. Here, the food stays cold, and that's when viewers start to feel something dangerously familiar, because most people have sat at a table like this. Maybe not literally, but emotionally. A conversation postponed, a truth delayed, a moment when saying the right thing felt harder than staying silent. The story doesn't accuse the viewer. It invites them, and invitations are harder to refuse than confrontations. Reaction videos from this segment are telling. People stop talking. They stop joking. Their faces change. You can see them remembering something, even if they don't say it. This is the genius of Drenched Dinner's opening. It doesn't build tension toward an event. It builds tension toward awareness. The rain grows louder. Someone shifts in their seat. A glance is held for just a beat too long. And suddenly, the audience realizes something terrifying. Nothing dramatic needs to happen for this to hurt, because the pain is already there. The dinner is drenched, not by rain alone, but by everything unsaid. Viewers don't yet know what the story will take from them. They only know they've already given it their attention. And attention, once captured emotionally, is the most difficult thing to reclaim. By the end of this first stretch, audiences aren't asking, what is this story about? They're asking something far more dangerous. Why does this feel like me? And that question is what keeps them watching. Asterisk, by now, the audience has settled into something unfamiliar, not comfort, not confusion. Suspension. The kind where you're not sure whether you should relax or prepare yourself. This is where Drenched Dinner begins to quietly separate casual viewers from emotionally invested ones, because the story still hasn't revealed anything new. Instead, it starts removing assumptions. The rain outside hasn't stopped. If anything, it feels closer now, louder, heavier, almost impatient. And inside the room, the conversation moves, but never forward. Words circle each other. Questions get redirected. Answers arrive incomplete. This frustrates the logical part of the brain. Viewers want information. They want clarity. They want to know why this dinner matters. but the story refuses to explain itself, and that refusal is deliberate because explanation creates distance, and Drenched Dinner doesn't want distance. It wants proximity. Audience. Reaction data from this stretch shows something subtle but powerful. Viewers stop multitasking. Phones go down. Background noise fades. Eyes stay locked on the screen, not because something is happening, but because something feels about to. Anticipation without payoff is uncomfortable, and discomfort keeps people watching. The characters begin revealing themselves not through confession, but through avoidance. A topic changes too quickly. A smile arrives too late. A pause stretches just long enough to feel intentional. This is where many viewers begin projecting motives. They assume guilt. They assume resentment. They assume history. And in doing so, they become emotionally complicit. Because once you assume something about a character, the story can challenge you for it. The rain taps harder against the glass now. Some viewers described this part as claustrophobic, even though nothing has changed. Visually, that's important. The room didn't shrink. The camera didn't tighten. The viewer did. As minutes pass, reactions shift from curiosity to unease. People stop asking what will happen and start wondering what already did. This is the turning point, not in plot, but in perception. The dinner table no longer feels neutral. It feels staged, not staged by the characters, but staged rhythm. As if the room itself is waiting. Waiting for someone to break. And that's when the audience realizes something unsettling. The story isn't hiding information. It's testing patience. Every delayed response becomes heavier. Every polite exchange feels loaded. Viewers begin reading between lines that may not even exist. And that's exactly the point, because the most powerful stories don't tell you what to feel. They let you accuse yourself of feeling it. Reaction videos from this section show a strange behavior. People nodding. Not in agreement, but in recognition. As if the story is confirming something they already knew but never wanted named. This is where Drenched Dinner becomes personal. Not through backstory, not through exposition. But through familiarity, because we've all sat through moments like this. Conversations where honesty felt dangerous. Moments where saying nothing felt safer and worse. The rain outside becomes more than sound. It becomes time passing, relentless, uninterested. In resolution, viewers begin noticing patterns. How certain topics never return. How certain silences repeat. This repetition creates meaning, and meaning creates expectation. By now, the audience knows something is coming, but they don't know what, and the not knowing is exhausting. This exhaustion is critical, because emotionally tired viewers are more vulnerable. More open, more honest with themselves. That's why the story still refuses to deliver. It lets the tension ferment. At this point, some viewers report feeling irritated, even angry. This is going nowhere. Why won't they just say it? What's the point? These reactions are part of the design because irritation is often the emotion closest to truth. We get angry when something touches a nerve. And Drenched Dinner is pressing gently but continuously. The dinner progresses, but nothing resolves. Plates remain mostly untouched. The food cools. This detail matters more than it seems. Cold food is a visual reminder of time. Wasted. Of moments, missed. Of opportunities. Delayed until they lose meaning. The audience may not consciously register this, but emotionally, they do. And then comes the shift. Not a twist, not yet. A realization. The story isn't moving toward a dramatic reveal. It's moving toward an emotional collision. Between what the characters want to say and what the audience already suspects. This is when viewers start leaning forward again, not out of excitement, but dread, because dread doesn't rush. It waits. The rain grows louder once more, and suddenly, the audience understands. This dinner isn't about closure. It's about delay. And delay is painful because it's a just choice. Choice not to speak. Choice not to act. Choice not to confront. Viewers start asking themselves uncomfortable questions. What would I say at this table? What have I avoided saying elsewhere? That's the moment the story crosses a line. It stops being observed. It starts being experienced. The tension now feels shared. Not just between characters, but between the screen and the viewer. This is where emotional investment locks in, because now leaving the story would mean abandoning the question it raised inside you, and most people can't do that. By the end of this stretch, something remarkable has happened. Still no explosion, still no confession, yet the audience feels heavier, more aware. More exposed. They've been prepared, slowly, quietly, for what comes next. And they don't realize yet that the story is about to take advantage of that preparation. Asterisk. By this point, the audience is no longer waiting for the story to begin. They know it already has. Something subtle but permanent has shifted inside the viewing experience. The room on screen feels heavier than it did 15 minutes ago, even though nothing visible has changed. That's because tension has weight. And Drenched Dinner has been adding it slowly, deliberately, without ever letting it spill. The rain continues, steady and unbothered. Its rhythm has become familiar now, almost comforting. That familiarity is dangerous, because once discomfort becomes familiar, people stop resisting it. They accept it. And acceptance is where the story makes its first incision. The characters continue speaking, but the audience notices something new. They are no longer talking to each other. They are talking around something. Each sentence feels like it's avoiding the same invisible object in the center of the table. An absence so strong it starts to feel like a presence. Viewers begin sensing that the dinner itself is no longer the setting. It's the barrier. Polite excuse to stay seated. A ritual that allows everyone to avoid standing up and leaving, or worse, standing up and saying the truth. Reaction footage from this stretch reveals a telling change. People stop reacting outwardly. No commentary, No jokes, just long silences after lines land. This is when the story quietly asserts control, because silence from an audience is not boredom. It's submission. The first fracture arrives without warning, not through dialogue, not through action. But through realization. A single moment reframes everything that came before it. Not enough to explain the story, just enough to make the audience question their assumptions. Viewers suddenly understand that what they thought was awkward was intentional. What they thought was slow was restrained. And what they thought was passive was defensive. This is when the audience realizes the dinner is not neutral ground. It's contested territory. Every pause becomes strategic. Every glance becomes loaded. And suddenly, the silence no longer feels empty. It feels guarded. This realization is deeply unsettling, because guarded silence implies fear. Not fear of what will happen, but fear of what might be revealed. At this moment, viewers start reinterpreting earlier scenes in their minds. Small gestures take on new meaning. Half-finished sentences feel suspicious. Even the rain sounds different now, less atmospheric, more intrusive. This is a psychological technique known as retrospective activation, when new information reshapes memory, and Drenched Dinner uses it expertly. Audience comments from this section frequently include phrases like, "Wait, that changes everything. I think I misunderstood the whole beginning. I need to rewatch this." That urge to rewatch is crucial. It means the story has escaped linear time. It now exists as a loop in the viewer's mind. The dinner conversation continues, but something has broken. Not visibly. Emotionally. The politeness feels thinner now. The smiles feel strained. And the audience feels complicit, because they've been watching this fracture form, and they didn't stop it. The rain intensifies again. This time, it feels accusatory. As if the outside world is pushing in, demanding something the room refuses to give. Viewers begin to sense that the story isn't heading toward resolution. It's heading toward exposure. And exposure is terrifying because it removes choice. At this point, some audience members begin to feel physical discomfort, tightness in the chest, restlessness, an urge to look away, and a stronger urge not to. This is the body responding to emotional threat. The story has crossed from narrative into sensation. One moment in particular becomes the focal point of discussion later. A line delivered calmly too. Calmly. No raised voice, no dramatic pause, just a statement that lands and doesn't get acknowledged. The camera doesn't linger. The music doesn't swell, but the audience feels it. This is the first undeniable crack, because silence after truth is louder than any argument. Reaction. Videos show viewers instinctively holding their breath here, not because they expect something to happen, but because they feel something has already happened. This is where the story quietly declares its intent. It will not comfort. It will not resolve. easily, and it will not let the audience stay. Neutral. The characters return to safer topics. But the shift is permanent. The table feels colder now. The food, irrelevant. Viewers sense that the dinner is now longer about avoidance. It's about endurance. Who can last longer without breaking, and who will be forced to carry the weight of that silence afterward. By the end of this segment, audiences understand something critical. The story is not asking what happened. It's asking why it was never addressed, and that question is far more dangerous. Because answers to what can be EXTERNALIZED. Answers to why live inside us. As the rain continues, relentless and unchanging, the audience realizes they are no longer just watching a dinner. They are witnessing the cost of restraint, and that cost is about to be collected. Asterisk by now. The audience isn't asking for answers anymore. They're bracing for consequences. Something fundamental has changed in the atmosphere of the story. Not in volume, not in pace. And weight. Every word spoken now feels expensive. Every pause feels deliberate. The characters seem aware of it too, though none of them acknowledge it openly. That awareness is contagious. Viewers begin to feel as if they're intruding on something private, something fragile. And yet they can't look away. This is the stage where silence stops being neutral. It becomes a choice, and choices carry responsibility. The rain continues its steady insistence outside, but now it feels different. Earlier it was background, then pressured out. Now it feels like time running out. Audience reactions from this stretch often describe a strange emotional contradiction. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't want it to stop. That's because discomfort has transformed into engagement. The story has taught the viewer how to watch it. Slowly, carefully, emotionally. Characters' movements are smaller now, more restrained. A hand hesitates before reaching for a glass. A glance is broken too quickly. These micro moments matter because when people are hiding something, their bodies betray them before their words do. Viewers pick up on this instinctively, not consciously, emotionally. The story never tells us what's wrong. It lets us feel that something is. This is where Drenched Dinner begins asking something dangerous of its audience. Patience. Not the passive kind, the painful kind. The kind that forces you to sit with unresolved tension and examine it. As minutes pass, the conversation circles back toward familiar territory, but now it feels risky, like stepping onto thin ice you already know is cracked. The audience senses that if certain words are spoken, there will be no way back. That knowledge creates dread, not of conflict, but of finality. One moment in particular stands out during this stretch, a question that could change everything, asked indirectly. Softly. Almost politely. The kind of question people ask when they're hoping not to hear the answer. The response doesn't arrive. Immediately, the pause stretches longer than before, long enough for viewers to start forming answers. In their own minds, this is crucial because whatever answer the story gives next will have to compete with the one the audience has already imagined. That's a dangerous position for any narrative, but Drenched Dinner embraces it. The response, when it comes, is incomplete, carefully phrased. Technically truthful, emotionally evasive, and the audience feels the evasion instantly. Reaction. Footage shows viewers leaning back at this point. Not away, but inward. Processing. Because they recognize that kind of answer. They've given it before. They've heard it before. It's the answer people use when the truth is too heavy to place on the table. This is where empathy deepens. The characters are no longer being judged. They're being understood. And understanding complicates everything. The rain grows louder again, but no one reacts. The sound has become normalized, just like the tension, and that normalization is unsettling because it suggests this isn't the first time something like this has happened. It suggests a pattern. Viewers begin wondering how long these characters have been carrying this silence. And more importantly, how long they themselves have. The story now feels less like a drama and more like an examination, not of events. Of behavior. Why do people avoid difficult truths even when avoidance causes more pain? Why do we wait for the right moment that never comes? Why does silence feel safer until it doesn't? These questions surface naturally without the story ever asking them out loud. That's the mark of effective psychological storytelling. The audience is thinking with the story, not about it. At this point, something subtle but critical happens. Viewers stop expecting a dramatic outburst. They stop hoping for release. They realize the story may never give them that relief. And instead of rejecting that idea, they accept it. This acceptance is devastating because it mirrors real life. Real life rarely offers catharsis on cue. It offers accumulation. And accumulation is what Drenched Dinner is documenting. Every withheld word stacks on top of the last. Every polite smile becomes heavier. Every deflection becomes harder to justify. The audience now understands the danger, not of what might be revealed, but of what might never be. As this segment closes, the tension reaches a new state. Not higher, deeper. It settles. Like something sinking into the floor. Viewers feel it in their chests. In the stillness between breaths. They're no longer watching to see what happens next. They're watching to see who breaks first. And perhaps more uncomfortably, they're wondering what breaking would even look like. Because sometimes breaking doesn't make noise. Sometimes it just changes what can never be repaired. The rain continues. The dinner continues. And the cost of silence keeps accumulating. Unpaid. For now. Asterisk. Something has quietly crossed the threshold. The audience may not be able to name the moment it happened, but they feel it. This dinner can no longer end the way it began. The air in the room feels heavier now, almost dense, as if words, once spoken, would have trouble moving through it. And maybe that's the point, because at this stage, silence isn't just avoidance anymore. It's preservation. The characters seem aware that whatever happens next will define what this moment becomes in memory, not just for each other, but for themselves. Viewers sense this instinctively. Reaction footage shows people sitting unnaturally still here, as if movement itself might disturb something fragile. The rain continues, but now it feels distant. Less immediate. As though the real storm has moved inside. This is where the audience begins to feel a new emotion layered on top of tension. Grief. Not for something lost, but for something that may never be recovered. The conversation touches closer to the truth now, not directly, but unmistakably. References feel sharper. Implications linger longer. The audience no longer doubts that something significant is being avoided. They understand what is happening. What they don't know is whether the story will allow escape. This uncertainty is exhausting, but it's also deeply human. Because most emotional damage doesn't come from explosions. It comes from endurance. The characters are enduring each other. The audience is enduring the moment. And endurance, by definition, has a limit. When exchange becomes particularly difficult to watch. Not because of what's said, but because of what isn't challenged. A statement lands that feels wrong. Incomplete. Possibly untrue. And no one corrects it. The silence that follows is not awkward. It's complicit. Viewers react strongly here, often subconsciously. A shift in posture, a sharp inhale, because they recognize that silence. They've participated in it before. This is where Drenched Dinner stops being observational and becomes accusatory, not toward its characters, but toward its audience. It asks quietly, how many times have you let something pass because confronting it felt worse? The story doesn't wait for an answer. It lets the discomfort linger. The rain resumes its presence again, audible, insistent, but no one looks toward the window. There's nowhere left to look. At this point, many viewers report feeling a strange urge to intervene. To say something. To break the tension themselves. That urge is critical. It means the audience has emotionally entered the room. They are no longer outside observers. They are witnesses, and witnesses carry responsibility. The dinner continues, but the energy has changed. The characters are no longer protecting peace. They're protecting themselves, and self-protection often looks like distance, emotionally. This is devastating, because distance suggests that closeness is no longer safe. The audience understands now that even if the truth were spoken, it might be too late. This realization lands heavily enough that many viewers stop hoping for a resolution. They start preparing for aftermath. The story has shifted from what will happen to what will remain, and what will remain feels damaged. The rain outside grows louder once more, not as pressure, not as time, but as inevitability. The audience senses the story tightening, not rushing. Compressing, like something drawing inward before a collapse. As this segment closes, there's a moment of near break, a breath held too long, a gaze sustained too deeply. For a second, it feels like everything might finally surface, but it doesn't. And that restraint hurts more than release ever could, because now the audience understands the truth. The most painful outcome isn't confrontation. It's continuation. Continuing like this, saying nothing, knowing everything. The dinner is no longer a moment. It's a memory being formed, and memories, once set, cannot be edited. The rain keeps falling, and whatever is coming next will not undo what's already been done. Asterisk by now. The silence no longer feels intentional. It feels strained. As if it's being held in place by effort alone. The audience can sense it. The tension has stopped being controlled and started being managed. And anything that needs managing is already unstable. The rain outside has faded into something barely noticed, not because it stopped, but because the characters and the viewers have reached a point where external noise no longer matters. Everything important is happening internally. This is where emotional fatigue sets in. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from carrying something for too long without relief. Audience reactions during this stretch often describe feeling tired, but not bored. Emotionally tired, and that distinction matters, because emotional fatigue lowers defenses. It makes people honest, sometimes against their will. The conversation begins to falter. Not in content, but in rhythm. Sentences trail off. Responses arrive slower. The audience notices that the characters are no longer choosing silence. Silence is choosing them. This shift is subtle, but devastating, because it means restraint has become incapacity. They may want to speak, but they no longer know how. Viewers recognize this immediately. It mirrors moments in real life when holding something in for too long makes articulation impossible. Words don't feel adequate anymore. Everything feels too heavy. One character attempts to reintroduce normalcy, a comment meant to lighten the mood. It fails, not awkwardly. Quietly. No one reacts. The attempt evaporates. This moment lands harder than any argument would have, because it signals loss of control. The structure of the dinner, politeness, routine, performance, is breaking down. The audience senses it. This is where many viewers begin feeling anxiety rather than anticipation, not because they fear what will happen, but because they fear what won't. They fear that the story will deny release entirely, that the tension will not explode. It will suffocate. The rain returns to prominence, briefly. Not loud. Persistent. A reminder that time is still moving. Even if nothing is being resolved, the characters are visibly exhausted. Now. Not physically, emotionally. They've been guarding themselves for too long. And guards eventually tire. The audience leans forward. Again. Not with curiosity. With concern. Because concern means investment. And investment means vulnerability. This is the point where viewers stop analyzing. They start feeling. Strongly. And feelings, unlike thoughts, don't obey logic. One exchange becomes the emotional fault line of this section. A statement is made, not accusatory, not confessional, just honest. Barely. It doesn't reveal everything, but it reveals enough. Enough to confirm what the audience already suspected. Enough to change the emotional geometry of the room. The response is not immediate. And when it comes, it's wrong. Not morally. Emotionally. It doesn't meet the moment. It avoids it. This avoidance is devastating because it confirms the audience's deepest fear that the truth may be acknowledged and still not addressed. Reaction footage shows viewers shaking their heads here. Some whisper no. Others go completely still. This is grief. Not for what happened in the story, but for what the story reflects. The rain intensifies again, and for the first time, it feels hostile. Not atmospheric. Hostile. Like the outside world expressing what the room refuses to. The characters retreat further into themselves. The audience feels the distance grow. This is emotional collapse without volume. No shouting. No crying. Just withdrawal. This kind of collapse is harder to watch than chaos. Because chaos promises an end. Withdrawal suggests continuation. As this segment progresses, viewers begin to understand something crucial. The dinner may end, but the damage won't, and that understanding hurts. It hurts because it's realistic. Real life rarely resolves things cleanly. It leaves us with fragments, with unresolved conversations, with moments we replay endlessly. The story is no longer moving toward a twist. It's moving toward a state where nothing can be fixed easily, where words arrive too late. Where intentions no longer matter. The rain continues. The plates remain. The silence stretches. And the audience realizes this isn't about whether someone breaks. It's about whether anyone recovers. And that question has no easy answer. By now, the audience has been carrying tension for over an hour and a half, not actively noticing it every second, but consistently aware. The story has built something invisible, a pressure that sits between the viewer and the screen. And now, it begins to settle into something more subtle, not resolution, Not released. Aftermath. The characters shift slightly in their posture. They speak less. Even glances seem heavier. The room itself feels changed. Not because the furniture moved. Not because the rain intensified. Because emotional events leave traces. And traces linger. Audiences often describe this moment as disorienting, not boredom, not clarity. Suspense without action is disorienting. Viewers lean forward. They pause, as if the story might catch them mid-thought. They sense patterns they hadn't noticed before, small repeated gestures, eyes glancing too briefly, hands fidgeting with silverware. These are micro-indicators of unease, and they are more powerful than any shouted dialogue. The first subtle confessions arrive here, not overt, barely audible. A line is delivered that hints at regret. A glance lingers just a second longer. A hand hesitates over a glass. Viewers recognize the significance immediately, even if the words say little. The intention screams, and the audience absorbs it. This is when emotional reflection begins. Audiences stop expecting external events. They start internalizing. How would I have reacted? What would I have said? What have I avoided in my own life? The rain becomes secondary now. It's no longer a backdrop or a metaphor. It's a mirror for what is past, for what remains unspoken. The story now operates on two levels simultaneously: the visible tension between characters, the invisible tension inside the viewer, and the two layers reinforce each other. The first full-on audience discussion happens here. On social media, comments pour in, not about plot. About feeling. I can't stop thinking about the pauses. This reminds me of a conversation I never had. The silence felt heavier than the words. This is critical. Because by this point, viewers are no longer passive. They are active participants, feeling the consequences, judging themselves, remembering their own unresolved moments. And the story doesn't tell them what to think. It lets them project. And projection is a powerful tool, more powerful than revelation. A whispered apology here, a barely held gaze there. These small gestures shift the emotional landscape entirely. By now, the audience begins anticipating collapse, not in others, but in themselves. They are bracing for emotional confrontation, and the story respects that nothing happens yet, but the tension is palpable. And anticipation without release is the most potent force of all. At this stage, the first significant visual metaphor is highlighted. The plates remain, food untouched, and for viewers, the metaphor is clear. Not nourishment lost, not opportunity wasted, but time passed. Time when connection was possible and ignored. And now that window may be gone. Audience reactions here are subtle but consistent. Breathing slows, shoulders tense, eyes narrow, focusing inward. It is no longer the story causing anxiety. It is the story reflecting it. By the end of this section, a pattern emerges. The dinner table is a landscape of avoidance. The audience recognizes that this is familiar, and the familiarity is terrifying, not because of the characters, because of themselves. They've all been at tables like this, or meetings, or moments in life where words were withheld, and that recognition cuts deeper than any twist. The final minutes of this segment focus on small, personal revelations, a glance exchanged, a word omitted, a sigh held too long. And suddenly, the audience begins piecing together emotional truths. The story is not about action. It is about consequence. And the consequence is enduring, internal, permanent. The rain continues, constant, indifferent. And in its constancy, the audience realizes they are not simply watching a dinner. They are witnessing a microcosm of human hesitation, regret, and fragile honesty. No shout, no outburst, no sudden revelation. Yet the impact is undeniable, because by now, the audience understands the aftermath is here, and it is inescapable. By now, the audience is no longer merely observing, they are inside the room. The characters' hesitation is their own, the silences resonate in their own memories. The rain is no longer external, it is inside them. Every drip echoes unresolved conversations, missed opportunities, and delicate truths avoided for too long. The first signs of the final fracture emerge slowly. A glance is held too long. A hand lingers over a cup. A word almost escapes lips and is swallowed. The audience feels the weight. Immediately. It is the weight of recognition. They are no longer thinking about the plot. They are thinking about themselves, and the story knows it. No abrupt shocks. No twist to satisfy curiosity. Just slow, deliberate, unavoidable emotion. Audience reactions are visceral. Some breathe sharply. Some clutch their hands. Some whisper to themselves because the story has stopped entertaining and started teaching. Teaching what? That emotional truths cannot always be avoided. That silence carries cost. That awareness can hurt more than revelation. The next segment of this final stretch focuses on reflection. Each character acts more cautiously. Each glance carries history. The camera lingers on details previously overlooked. Plates cooling in silence. Rain streaking down windows. Shadows stretching across the faces of those at the table. These details amplify tension without drama. They require the audience to invest attention, memory, and feeling. And by now, the audience has invested everything. The story pushes them further into introspection. Questions arise. Internally, what have I avoided saying? Who have I ignored? Which moments have I postponed, only to find they can never be repeated? This is the psychological climax. It is subtle. It is quiet. It is devastating. Then the final fracture occurs. A line is delivered. A gesture is made. Small, almost insignificant, but irreversible. The audience recognizes the meaning immediately. It confirms everything they suspected. It validates every unease. It leaves them hollow. The dinner ends not with resolution, but with awareness. Not with catharsis, but with acknowledgement. The rain finally fades, not with relief, but with inevitability. Silence settles permanently. The characters move. The audience sits. Nothing can be undone. This is where Drenched Dinner leaves its mark. The story is over. The experience is not. Viewers are left with reflection, recognition, an emotional landscape impossible to leave. Unchanged. Social reactions from this segment show long-term effect. Comments linger days after watching. People revisit early moments, seeing them differently. Conversations emerge, often about self, not the story. And the genius is clear. The story did not need a twist. It did not need drama. It only needed time, observation, and patience. The final minutes focus on letting the audience absorb. No music swells. No words rush. Just reflection. And then, just as the rain falls one last time outside the frame, the story concludes. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But undeniably, the impact remains. Because the story isn't measured in plot. It is measured in what it leaves behind. A mirror, a question, a memory. And for those who stayed through 180 minutes, the takeaway is permanent. The most powerful moments are not those that explode. They are those that quietly, relentlessly shape who we feel we are. The dinner is over. The audience changed. The rain silent. The story eternal.